Sunlove. I'm the director of Soldiers Memorial. Welcome to this month's installment of Challenge Chat. We're doing something a little different this month. We're actually giving a sneak peek of some outdoor tours that we're about to launch here at Soldiers Memorial. So we'll give you a little preview of what those tours will be all about, and cover some of a little bit of the content as well. But just wanted to thank you for coming and for attending. Hope you're all safe and sound at home or in your offices or where you need to be today. Certainly for the Missouri Historical Society, safety has been a top priority through the COVID pandemic, and thus nearly all of our programming now is virtual through mostly the Zoom platform. But we are open. We're open Wednesday through Sunday, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. We do request that you make a reservation. You can do that online at mohistory.org/memorial. We do have some safety protocol in place when you visit. We ask that you wear a mask and to make that reservation. So we have some sort of contact information, whether that's a telephone number, address, or email, that should there be a need for it, we can support the city in their contact tracing. But so far we haven't had to get into that business, thank goodness. But I wanted to thank all of you that are members for being members and supporting both the Missouri Historical Society and Soldiers Memorial. Certainly couldn't do programs like this without your support. Zoom itself is not a free platform. It costs quite a bit of money for us to have this subscription and to host these sites, and your support certainly makes that happen. So thank you for that. I will post some information in the chat box later for those of you who are interested in obtaining some information on membership and some other things as well. Just real quickly, some logistics. I'll just mention a few details about today's program. Lon and I are going to basically have a little bit of a chat here. We're going to put the chat back in Challenge Chat and kind of discuss what we're going to be doing. We'll take probably about 30 minutes, and then hope to get you involved with that chat through the Q&A box. And you'll see the Q&A at the bottom or top of your screen there, and you can type questions into that box. And once we get towards the end here, I'll open up that box and start asking some of your questions that you'd like to address to either Lon or myself. Today's presentation is being recorded, so if you'd like to view it again or share it with others, you can visit our Missouri Historical Society YouTube channel, and I will also place that in the chat box, so you can find that and you can visit that. And that'll not only have this recording, but I think we're up to over 60 or 70 of these virtual programs that we've done over the last few months. So there's quite a menu there if you're interested in finding some more programs that have been hosted in the past. Your feedback is always important. We'd appreciate it if you can answer a few questions for us after the program. What's called a KOBO toolbox survey will open up in a tab on your browser. So keep an eye out for that after the session. That should pop up immediately when we're done here. I think that's all I have. I'm going to introduce Lon a little bit. Lon's been a volunteer docent at Soldiers Memorial for, I think, since we reopened in November of 2018. He's given lots and lots of tours. Most of that energy has been focused on touring the galleries. The core exhibit called St. Louis in Service, which focuses on the history of St. Louis and military service from the Revolutionary War all the way through today, and then also tours of that lower level special exhibit, which is currently World War I, called the St. Louis and the Great War. So Lon's been given lots of tours, but as COVID struck, one of the steps that we've taken was to eliminate the indoor tours. So talking recently with Lon, Lon expressed an interest in getting outdoor tours of the memorial started, and so that's where we're at today. We're going to talk a little bit about what these tours are going to look like and what you might learn in these tours, and then we'll go from there. So let me advance these slides. So That's the title slide that I should have had up while I was just talking through all that. So now you can see that there. And then a little bit about the logistics of these outdoor tours. They'll be each Wednesday at 1 p.m. They'll begin October 21st. You will be required to register online for those, and you can do that at mohistory.org/events. Tours will be limited actually to 9 people plus lawn, so 10 people per tour. And then the standard COVID protocol will be in place, so visitors will be asked to wear a mask and to keep a little bit of distance between each other to keep each other safe. So, Lon, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit more and maybe kick this off a little bit, maybe some opening comments?
Well, thanks, Mark. Yes, I'm a native St. Louisian and have had the pleasure of being involved with the Missouri History Museum for a while, and a member of the Historical Society for, since the mid 70s. And when Soldiers Memorial was opening up, it corresponded when at a time in my life when I was retiring from my workaday business, and my bachelor degree is in history, so I've always been fascinated with history, and I thought, this is a great thing to do to keep busy, and it has been. Exploring the Soldiers Memorial and being involved in it from the get-go was just a great opportunity. It's a beautiful place. It's a structure that I've seen over the years living here and been fascinated by it, but getting inside and learning more about it has been a real revelation, and I hope to share some of that with you on our discussion today, and hopefully you'll come down and see it in person.
Yeah, and I have a next slide here is a kind of a map of where we're at. I'm sure most of you, or at least some of you, are familiar with the location of Soldiers Memorial, but it's right here downtown. You can see this is Memorial Plaza here. This is the Arch grounds. So just a few blocks from the Arch to the west. And it's located on these 2 blocks between Market and Pine and 13th and 14th Streets. So it's a right in a nice downtown location, which has some historic importance. I don't know, Lon, do you want to talk a little bit about maybe some context? Why is Soldiers Memorial where it's at, and how did all this get started here? Why do we have a Soldiers Memorial downtown, and maybe specifically its location, because it's not just happenstance that it is located where it's located. And
right. That's right. This all came about at the turn of the last century. There was this movement in the country, they call it now the City Beautiful movement, that was looking to beautify cities and not just be a hodgepodge of developments and tenements and all that had grown up since the city began, but something that the city government was looking at to be more coordinated in their zoning and the types of buildings that were going to be constructed. Also, as you know, in 1904, we were going to be hosting a World's Fair. Prior to that, and in this picture on the right-hand side behind the National Lumber sign is where Soldiers Memorial sits right now. On the left-hand side, you can see that building is the Municipal Courts building, and then way down the street there, you see the tower for Union Station. And brings me back to the World's Fair. The Union Station opened in, I think, 1894, and 1904 was going to be the World's Fair, and there was this thought, hey, people are going to come to St. Louis. What are they going to see when they get off the train? They're going to come out and they're going to see this hodgepodge of buildings and old tenements and stuff like that. Let's try and do something to spruce up the area. So that was all part of the city, beautiful thought that went on. And some buildings, there were some efforts that began before the war, but the war interrupted things in many ways. So it wasn't until 1923 that the city finally passed what was at that time the largest bond issue in the entire country, $87 million, which today equates to about 1.4, 1.3, 1.4 billion dollars to address 20 something actual developments in the St. Louis area to beautify and to improve. The River des Peres in the Forest Park area, the downtown area, and part of that was this mall that we have now, in St. Louis. So this, as you see here, was one of the things talking about some of the propositions. Number 14 on the list was to build a memorial and a memorial plaza. And the thought behind the memorial was this was not going to be something to commemorate any victories won or lost or any wars won or lost, but really to celebrate and remember those people who stood up and served their country. So that was the genesis of the Soldiers Memorial and why it is located on what is now the mall. As you'll learn as we go down there, there was a lot of clearing out that had to be done before construction began. Construction finally didn't get underway too smoothly because, like a lot of government programs, we ran out of money after clearing everything. So by it sort of sat dormant by 1929, 1930. We were all, into the Depression. The stock market had crashed. There was no more money to do anything, and we became the proverbial shovel-ready program that sat there and waited. And fortunately, when FDR came into office, he had many projects. They call them the alphabet soup thing. One was the WPA, the Works Progress Administration, and they put more money towards building Soldiers Memorial. So in 1934, construction finally began. 1936, this is a picture of FDR coming to speak at the dedication. This was in October of that year. And you could see behind him and to the right is the Kiel, the old Kiel Auditorium, which was one of those projects that came out of the bond issue. They at least got that built before they ran out of money. But so that was part of that $87 million bond issue. But Roosevelt comes and he dedicates the building, and then it was actually open to the public on Memorial Day, 1938.
Yep.
Yeah. So we've been up and running ever since. That's a little bit of the background of how we got here and why we are where we are.
Yeah, I think that story for me, Lon, I think it's that story of the clearing is, it's interesting. I think we tend to think of our cities as kind of static and, they are what they are, but I think this image taken from the top of the courts building, this is Market here down to Union Station, and this is all of these buildings were removed to create the Memorial Plaza. The Court of Honor now sits here, and Soldiers Memorial over here. So just this, within the last 100 years, just how much has changed. Of course, here is the site of the Kiel or the Stiefel Auditorium. That all of this is now gone, and they built the auditorium there. This would be the home of now the Enterprise Center, where our champion St. Louis Blues work. So that's just how much that changed over that time. You can see the caption written on this photo, the view of the site for Memorial Plaza, but just a really dramatic transformation.
And Mark, this was taken from the top of the Civil Courts building?
Right.
Yeah. And that's another one of the buildings that came out of the bond issue.
Yeah.
The one that's over your shoulder.
Yeah. Yeah, right here. There. So, and then this one would be, this photo is taken from the top of City Hall looking northwest, again down Market Street. Another interesting thing that with these photos, and I think I was talking to our curator Mike Benso about this, but it's this mixture of, it's at this time, this is taken in the 1912, I think, but it's this mixture of horses and automobiles and trolley cars. So it's this time of kind of transformation that's happening in the country, but so many horses still on the street at that time. And then you can see this once, this is taken in the 20s, I think 1925, this photo, it's almost strictly all vehicles. So just that really a transformative era that Soldiers was being considered and constructed during. And then, as you said, Lon, here's these plaques here are on the side of the building. This one here dedicating when Roosevelt was there. We saw that photo earlier, but that October 14th, 1936 dedication, all part of the Federal Emergency Administration's Public Works project. So quite an undertaking. Ron, what do you think, as far as some of the features on the building? You know, we like I said when we were beginning, we talked so much about the inside of the building and the exhibits, and they're all very wonderful, but there's a number of things on the exterior that I think that maybe the casual passerby kind of takes for granted. What strikes you about some of the features, or what features impress you or do you find interesting?
Well, there's lots of things on the outside that I marveled at over the years and never really understood until I became a docent. You know, one of the things is on the exterior, high up, are medallions that represent the different service units that people who participated in World War I were in. And I never knew, yeah, so they encircle the building at the top. There's a total of 32 of these. And so here, as an example, they represent the different units, not branches of our armed forces, but although they are identified at times. But now here in the upper left-hand corner is a nurse, obviously. And because once again, we celebrate at Soldiers Memorial, not just the battles or we don't celebrate the battles won or lost, but the people who actually served there. So nurses who served there, and across from her is a Marine. And the identifying item of most of these people is the hat that they're wearing, the head covering. So this is a Marine, and you could see the Marine insignia there too. Below the Marine is an aviator, obviously, and by the insignia in front of him, we know that he is Army. Air Corps. The Air Force did not exist. That did not come into existence until 1947 or 48, when we developed a separate Air Force as its own branch of the military. And then across from the aviator is an Army person in the Chemical Corps. And, obviously you could identify that by his gas mask. So that was a fascinating feature to me. But the most outstanding feature has always been the four iconic Walter Hancock statues that many of us from St. Louis are familiar with, but we may not understand as well. There's four of them. They each, Walter Hancock, by the way, was a native St. Louisian. He grew up here. He went to Washington University, graduated from there, went on to be a celebrated international sculptor. And he was hired to come in and create these, to create sculptures to serve in this capacity. And the creativity that he brought to it is just magnificent. So there's four. There's vision here, and this is the idea of looking forward. And the hope of things and growth. And Mark, you had some thoughts about, some of the iconography that's in here, the wheat, the shafts of wheat that show the sustenance of life and moving, this hope for the future. On opposite vision, I don't know how your slides are set up here, but yeah, right here is on the left-hand side is courage. So we have a warrior moving into battle, and you can see his sword is fixed. He's moving forward. And then on the opposite side of the building, we see loyalty. And in this vision, his helmet is not there, and his sword is pointed down to show that he is loyal. He's not on the offense. He is loyal to his country. And the final one is, do we have, there she is sacrifice. This was a very controversial statue showing the sacrifice that soldiers make in serving their country. The interesting controversy involved that sort of at the last minute, Hancock decided that the woman should have in her arms this baby. Well, the people who had been hired to sculpt this said, wait a second, we only agreed to do four figures. That's going to be a fifth figure, and that's going to cost extra money. So they went back and forth about that, and finally the local people here capitulated and said, well, we'll do that. We'll throw in the $1,000 baby for with the project. Isn't that right, Mark?
Yeah, I think for the researchers out there, if you want to go and look at the old newspapers, it was quite the back and forth between the stonecutters and the city and Walter Hancock. But yeah, there's some. It's one of the more interesting, I guess, human interest stories that come out of the.
Another human interest thing about Hancock is that if any of you saw the movie or read the book, The Monument Men, these were the people who in World War II who went to Europe to try and save the arts and artifacts that the Nazis had looted and hidden. And Walter Hancock enlisted, and he became one of the Monument Men that served in Europe. So curiously, his role in the movie was played by another St. Louisian, John Goodman. So all things go around and come around in this story.
Yeah, and there's other features as well. There's so many things that I think on this outdoor tour, I think that you guests are going to appreciate is it's kind of like a what you might call a close study, or kind of a hard look at this at the building and the number of features. There's the medallions that you talked about, and of course the Walker Hancock statues. But then there's smaller things like the eagles on the stair entrances, and the pillars, or the urns, as I kind of look at them on the four corners of the building. And then of course all of that across the street as well in the Court of Honor, the Hillis Arnold sculpture. And I think we have a photo of that one. Here's the urns that we were, and Lon and I and our curator Mike Venza, we've been kind of studying these have place names at the bottom of each one of these. And these are the 13 identified campaigns of World War I, plus 3 place names, plus one more that identifies the Navy and recognizes the naval service during World War I. But those are another thing that you have to pause, and you have to look, and you have to be thoughtful. They're easy to kind of blow by and just walk by them, but and I think that's one thing I'm excited about with your outdoor tour, Lon, is that just actually taking the time to pause and look at what is right in front of you that we tend to kind of take for granted. But here's a kind of a close-up of those, and then of course these are the eagles on the stairs entering the building. And then one of my personal photos of the eagle that struck me one night as I was going home, and this was in the winter, but kind of a fun photo. I think when you fall in love with this building, as I think we have, you end up taking a lot of pictures of it because it's very photogenic.
Yeah,
and
it is a photogenic building, and I will mention to all of you that the setting of the building is pretty spectacular too, because there's lots of interesting things that we'll point out and talk about some of the surrounding buildings as well that we see. The wonderful Central Library, other monuments that are in the area, and some of the other buildings that were put up as part of this movement. So we'll talk about some of those things on our outdoor tour as well. And it's just a beautiful setting that we have down there.
Yeah, and I think when we were out there together, Lon, I think your time you took to point those out to me and to kind of develop that better appreciation for the entire kind of that physical landscape down there that soldiers is immersed in, and understanding each of those buildings, and when they, all of the neighboring buildings, and when they came about, and taking again another close look at those, I thought that was a really nice aspect to include into this outdoor tour. So I think people will appreciate that as well. I was going to ask you, Lon, kind of some logistics. There's those large, beautiful stairs. It looks kind of intimidating. I think that I would assume that people with mobility issues or of one kind or another are, of course, welcome on the tour, and that you've thought about those aspects as well.
Yeah, well, we're very fortunate. During the building is owned by the city of St. Louis, and they owned and operated it up until 2015. And while they always had an accessibility ramp, it really, by today's standards, is not very user-friendly, shall we say. So as part of the Missouri History Museum and the whole St. Louis area was really blessed by by a contribution from the Taylor Crawford Foundation. Enterprise Leasing folks have $25 million to renovate the building, and part of that renovation included a wonderful accessibility ramp that's on the east side of the building, on the 13th Street side. So it's a very, very convenient ramp, easy grade, easy to access the building. So you don't have that many stairs to traverse. You don't have any stairs to traverse, obviously, on the ramp. And then as our tour progresses, we have two options. We could either be completely outside on that first level that surrounds the building and explore things, or if it's the least bit inclement, we could walk next to the building inside this area here that surrounds, we could walk all the way around the building without getting wet. So that's really nice. It's a great feature, and it limits our, well, hopefully it'll extend the period of time that we could have these outdoor tours, because we won't have to worry about if there's a chance for a little drizzle one day or not.
Yeah, that's great. Let's see, I had a couple more questions. I think we laughed about this one a little bit yesterday, but what do you think what can a person expect to take away, or what do you think they'll learn, Lon?
Well, everyone's going to take away something different. And I think that's in large measure what they bring when they come to tour. Their personal experience, whether they had friends or relatives who served, or whether they themselves served in the military. So they will, have an appreciation for the dedication that people who served our country provided. People who love architecture will marvel at some of the features in this building, and hopefully after our tour or before the outdoor tour, they'll go inside and see some of the, while on the outside, the architectural style is called, stripped classic, so it's a classical design, but stripped of a lot of the ornamentation that was very popular with government built buildings back in the 20s and 30s. But inside, you're going to see some just unbelievable Art Deco features. And there's a stairwell in the building that is my favorite view. I don't know whether you have a picture of that, but I mean, it is just, you expect Hercule Poirot to come walking down the stairs. There's just so many beautiful things in architecture that someone could take away. Also the thoughtfulness of the architect. And here, this is a great slide to illustrate this. In the center is this black granite cenotaph. And a cenotaph is an empty tomb, so no one is interred there. But on the name, surrounding on each side are the names of 1,075 individuals from the St. Louis area who died in service to the country in World War I. And above the cenotaph, that's the Gold Star Mothers glass mosaic. And the Gold Star Mothers, as you may know, when a man or woman goes into service, at that time it was frequent that they would put a blue star or blue flag in their window. And if unfortunately that child died in service, then it became a gold star. So the Gold Star Mothers glass mosaic here represents those Gold Star Mothers, and the architect's thoughtfulness here of that the Gold Star Mothers continue to be looking out and looking over their children.
Yeah,
Great
that's
imagery and thoughtfulness.
yeah, and I think that's one of those aspects that just makes Soldiers Memorial so special, that that reverence and you know the, the somberness of it.
Yeah.
It is a beautiful place, but it's also a somber and it's a reverent place. And I think this cenotaph with the gold star mother symbolically looking down upon the cenotaph is, for me, has always been a kind of a very special place. And um,
And
but,
folks, that's where we're going to meet to start the tour.
yeah, that's a great question. I was actually working with our marketing team yesterday to describe the meeting place, and I used these terms, which actually were fairly new to me. But this space inside of a building, or not really inside of a building, but kind of inside, is called a loggia. It's opened on both ends. And loggia was a new term for me, and cenotaph was a new term as well within the last couple of years. And I think our description said to meet at the black granite cenotaph within the loggia. And Adeline of our marketing team wrote to me, and she said, "I'm not sure if everybody's going to know what those words mean." So,
Amen.
so we modified that a little bit,
Right.
but these. This is certainly special. I think I'm going to close with one more question, Lon, and then I'm going to, one quick one and one maybe a little bit longer. But how long do you think these tours will take? Yeah, how long?
I would hope that we, maybe 45 to 50-minute touring, and, we hope that we get questions along the way, but then at the end, another 10, 15 minutes for more in-depth questions that people might have. So hopefully if you come down, you'll plan to spend at least an hour that we'll be outside. So if it's a little chilly, dress warmly. But my hope for is that we'll inspire you to afterwards to go inside, to use our facilities. We have wonderful restrooms, by the way. Very clean, very sanitary, and very accessible. We have 2 elevators in the building as well. One is the original one. It's 1938, but it's still working. It works great. And one was put in as part of the restoration. So hopefully after our tour, it'll inspire some of you to spend some time and take a look at some of the interior and the exhibits. And Mark had mentioned the lower level, which is dedicated now to World War I. And it's important to note that this will, this as a lower level as a World War I exhibit will only be there until the end of this year. Is that correct, Mark? And then it's going to be...
That's correct. Yep, that will be deinstalled the first week in January. So so that's a
this is your chance to see it before it goes away. And it is really laid out well, and there's a really great about 7 or 8 minute movie that gives you an idea of what life in St. Louis was leading up to World War I, and it's really a great preview and overview.
Yeah, excellent. All right, one last question, Lon, and I think like we talked about yesterday, we went over 30 minutes, and I think you and I could probably go a couple hours on talking about the different features of this building. But I want to just ask you one quick thing. I think with COVID and museums, certainly the Missouri Historical Society, and really even before COVID, we've taken a lot of stuff virtual. Whether it's collections, you can go to the Missouri Historical Society website and visit what they call the cross collections web page, and you can see artifacts that are in the collection. And I think one fear of museums really across the nation as this kind of virtual stuff expanded was people would maybe wouldn't want to visit because you could see it online. But what do you think about that, Lon? I mean, why should, after we've talked about the building, and certainly we've shared a lot of photos of the building, why do you think people should bother? Why bother to come down now?
You don't have the same emotional impact seeing the pictures, and even though your pictures are very good, Mark, they're excellent pictures, but the emotional impact of being in the moment and seeing these in person just can't be duplicated. It can't be replicated any other way. It's just a very moving experience to see it, to see the surroundings, to take in the beauty and the majesty of this building and the surrounding buildings. It just, you got to do it in person.
Yeah, I agree. All right, well, the Q&A box is open. If anybody wants to drop a question in there, you certainly can. I'm going to forward here to the end slide. I think I have an end slide here. Here's the again, these outdoor tours. They're going to start October 21st. They'll be every week at 1 p.m. and I have a guarantee from the weatherman that it's always going to be nice on these 1 p.m. tours.
Yeah, if you could arrange weather like we've got today, it would be greatly appreciated.
Well, I did tell you, I think it was last around maybe New Year's last year. I think it was about that time. I do remember actually sitting outside at one of our local breweries and having a beer on the patio, and that was, I think, either the first week in January or last week in December. So we're apt to have some decent weather, but we, you know, despite that, we're going to continue these into the spring and into next summer as well. And I think this is going to be a nice staple to our offerings. You know, a reminder that the COVID protocol, the masks and the distancing will be in place, and you'll be able to learn more at mohistory.org/events. Real quick, wanted to thank you for tuning in today and let you know that the next Challenge Chat will be on November 4th, the first Wednesday of the month, as is typical, and it'll be at 12 p.m. and we'll be chatting about Veterans Day, the history of Veterans Day, and hope to have a couple veterans on to tell us what it means for them to be a veteran and what veterans, maybe what they do on Veterans Day and how they mark the day and celebrate the day. So again, kind of bringing the chat back into Challenge Chat and keep these a little more, less of a formal presentation and more of a discussion. But I see we have one question here in the Q&A. What exterior feature at Soldiers Memorial best evokes St. Louis's contributions to military service in your mind, Lon? And I'll throw that out to you. So what feature at Soldiers Memorial best evokes the St. Louis contributions to military service? That's a tough question.
Yeah. The St. Louis part is a challenge because, you know, the nice part about the museum and the Court of Honor, they were, and even the Hancock statues, these are all creations of St. Louisians. The building itself was designed by the largest architectural firm at that time, Morin, Russell and Crowe, St. Louis architectural firm that did a lot of buildings downtown. The Court of Honor was done by Eugene Mackey Jr. And then curiously fast forward to present day in when it was during the redo 2015 forward, his son Eugene Mackey III headed up that project. So there's a lot of St. Louis in this, but I failed to be able to identify a feature. You know, I'll take that back as we think about it. The fact that we memorialize on the cenotaph we mentioned, that on the cenotaph there's 1,075 names of those who fought in World War II, in World War I, and then in the Court of Honor, which was built in 1945 to 1948, there are 2,753 names of people who died serving the country in World War II. And later in the late 70s, we added plaques for Vietnam and Korea. And just this past year, we added another plaque, and I think there's 559 names on that of people who died in the service of their country after 1978. So that really brings it to a St. Louis contribution and memory of military service.
Yeah.
So it took a long time for me to get around to answering your question, but thanks for the question.
Yeah. Another question is, are chaplains represented on any of the exterior features? And I know they are not in any of the they are not represented in the medallions around the frieze, which you can see right over my shoulder here. There's, as Lon said, there's 32 different ones, and well, there's 32 total, and there's 20 that are unique, and then there's 12 that are repeats. We do have that list, but chaplains are not represented specifically in that area. And I would have to do the research, but on the individual names listed on all 5 of the memorials, the cenotaph to World War I, and then the memorial walls and the Court of Honor that list individuals who lost their lives in service, to identify if any of those individuals were serving as chaplains at that time. So not a complete answer, but I can say that they are not represented on the frieze, which is unfortunate. And then another question was about Hillis Arnold's sculpture in the Court of Honor, and I'll pull that up, image of that. Where is it? I know I put an image in here. We looked at it yesterday.
Yeah, we saw it earlier today, actually.
There we go. So this is across the street in the Court of Honor, which is just as much a part of Soldiers Memorial as the building itself. And this was part of the World War II dedication. Is that correct, Lon?
Yes. Yeah. And this was Eugene Mackey Jr. brought in Hillis Arnold to do the sculpture work. It represents a broken bayonet, and you know that the fight is over. Mark and I have spent a lot of time looking at the imagery here on each side and trying to interpret, you know, the meaning of all this, and there's just an awful lot there, and I really look forward to spending time with each of you and hearing your impressions and what you get from this. I don't want to tell you my interpretation of it or Mark's interpretation, but you know, we can do that when we're together, but I think everyone's going to have a different take from the imagery that we see here.
Yeah. I think that is the end of the questions. We do have a nice comment. Just going to read this out. This beautiful memorial is now a living museum with temporary exhibits with specific themes, artifacts that are rotated, and programs to support the guided tours. Those who have visited once need to return and watch the events online at mohistory.org. It's a stunning renovation and rebirth, and thanks to the devoted volunteers and staff. So thank you very much for that. Really really warm compliment. And I just want to close by thanking you, Lon. You know, you are a volunteer, so you're not getting paid to do this, and I think it's you and our other volunteers that we, you know, I say this and I mean every word of it. We just could not do what we do without you. And these tours are a classic example. I think I've been kind of chomping at the bit to do these, but I just have not had the capacity to get them done, you know, whether it's me or our staff. And thanks to you, Lon, for stepping up and saying, hey, I want to take this on and get these rolling. So I just want to give you a very warm thank you.
Well, it's a labor of love. Very enjoyable.
And I'll close with that. Again, you'll see a pop-up screen that will invite you to take a survey. I want to thank Lon. I want to thank Gus for participating and coming. And watch not only for these challenge chats that happen monthly, but also there's a whole lineup of what we're calling the St. Louis History Live programs. And these are 2 to 3 virtual events each week. So there's a lot going on online right now, even though our guided tours and things are not happening. There are a lot of online programs that you can participate in. And then both Soldiers Memorial and the History Museum are open Wednesday through Sunday. And then the Library and Research Center, our third facility, is also open with hours. So be sure to check out those websites before you visit, get your registrations in line and drop on in. I want to thank you again. Thank you, Lon, and thank everybody. Stay safe. Keep your neighbors safe, and do what we can, and we'll get through this pandemic together, and someday we'll get back to whatever the new normal looks like. So thank you to everybody.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.